One particular room where I work definitely has something going on in it. PTS pass in that room more than any other. Most claim to see her in the upper corners of the room, behind the door or behind the curtains. When pressed to describe her or who her is, they'll just point in a direction and say her. They rarely speak of her in the past tense, it's normally in the present tense. Like she is there. In that room lights flicker, mostly when you turn them off. They sort of surge a little bit if that makes sense. Sometimes PTS will complain about someone who keeps whispering hey, or breathing in their ear while they are trying to sleep. All stuff I dismissed as, yes, lots of PPL die there because it's room 1. It's more likely to have PPL in a BC, it's the first room on the hallway and most critical PTS are in that room closest to the nurse's station. Flickering lights are power surges, faulty wiring, or bad bulbs. People hearing things or seeing things is a regular phenomenon when they are dying, so I say it's the brain preparing to or actively dying, not a true ghost. One evening I was making rounds. It was about 2:30 a.m. I walked past that room. The lights were off. The door was closed as no one was in it. I came back by about 3 a.m. and the door was open about 2 foot. The bedside light was on and the curtain pulled around the far bed. I could see a silhouette of a person standing through the curtain. I thought it was a coworker trying to scare me. We scare each other regularly. Since I could see them through the curtain, I was going to reverse that shit and scare them. I slipped in the door, tiptoed across the room, and tried to grab them through the curtain. I lunged, fully expecting to grab him, and I grabbed nothing but air. I was leaning forward enough it looked like I was trying to swing on the curtain. I kind of kept going and ended up laying across the bed. Whoever I had seen through the curtain was not there. I had a shiver run up my spine and a sudden feeling of dread in my stomach. My hearing became very acute, and it was almost like things slowed down with my vision. I could hear my heart pounding in my ears, and it took what felt like forever to look back towards the door, the bathroom light that was off. Then pulsed, fluttered like it was trying to come on. Time and speed came back to me, and I bolted out the door and back to the nurse's station. My coworkers were all there doing some charting or come back up a different hall. They laughed when I told them what happened. We walked back down to the room. The light was still on, curtain was partly open and dangling where I pulled so hard on it. But the bed covers were flung open on one side like someone got out of bed. Bathroom light flipped right on and back off with no issues. They jokingly accused me of sleeping on the job and having a night terror. Now I use humor to kind of cope with that room, and I'm back on days. I'll say, "Not today, Satan," or "I rebuke you in the name of Jesus," or "The all-reliable, the power of Christ compels you," in a half-joking manner going in that room. But I know on the inside I'm still kind of low-key scared.
I used to work on a floor back in the day. Had a patient who was being discharged the next morning, only on PR and pain meds, and hadn't had anything mind-altering all day. I go in his room at 3 a.m. and ask him why he can't sleep. He says, "I'm not hurting or anything." And don't get me wrong, I love kids. But why are you letting children run around the unit so late? I asked what he was talking about. He said the kids in the dinosaur and cowboy costumes. I said I hadn't seen them, but I'll let the other staff know to send these kids back to their parents. Thinking to myself, who the hell let them in here this late in the first place? I head back to the nurse's station and tell the charge, who has worked there for years. I tell him, hey, the dude in room XY said he can't sleep because some kids keep coming in his room. He looks at me and says, less alarmed than you'd expect, all the kids in the dinosaur and cowboy costumes. I asked a couple other more veteran staff, and they all had stories of patients telling them the same thing. If they were all messing with me, then half the unit and my patient were phenomenal liars.
I worked at a very nice nursing home for a while as a med tech, CNA. While I was in school, I worked on the memory care unit. Genuinely well cared for, happy residents, clean facilities, the whole 9 yards. One of the residents, Mr. B, had been there since opening day, and he was very particular and liked things his way. He had his seat in the dining room. He got exactly 3 scoops of strawberry ice cream after dinner. He sat in his chair by his window until exactly 11:30. Just a grumpy little cutie pie. Well, he inevitably died, and a new resident had moved in less than a week later with her own things. But her bed and armchair were in the same place as Mr. B's. Her first night, I had done a round and was doing whatever dumb shit I did at night after residents were in bed, washing compression hose or something, and the new resident comes down the hall and said, "There's a man in my room telling me to get out." We had a man who would sometimes wander, so I assumed it was him and went with her to her room to take him back to bed. Her room was empty. Assuming it was still him, I tucked her back in and went to find him. No one was up, and the wanderer was asleep in bed. Oh well, maybe she dreamed it. I went back to the desk and she came up again, maybe 20 minutes later, saying, "He said to get out, that him in his room." I walked her back again. Nothing. She points to her armchair and is like, "He said to move my chair and put his back and to get out of his room." At which point my brain put 2 and 2 together. I ended up letting her sit in the nurse's station with me until third shift showed up. The third shift CNA got there and started complaining about the new resident being up. I explained what happened and she rolled her eyes and said, "Come on," and stormed off down the hallway muttering about my incompetence under her breath. She marched into the new resident's room and said, "Mr. B, you are dead. This is not your room anymore. Go on and let this poor woman sleep." The resident went to bed. I went home, and after that night, there were no more complaints of nighttime visitors from that resident. I felt kind of bad, but I didn't know how to exorcise ghosts. They didn't cover that in the medtech class.
On one of my old floors I worked on, we always had weird occurrences happen at night. It was a neuro step-down unit. This unit had glass walls so you could chart and monitor your patient. We had a patient who had a severe stroke and was non-verbal. Feeding tube, restrained, total care, etc. They rarely had family visit to In the middle of the night, their call light went off. When I answered it, a woman said, "He is really hurting. He needs his pain medicine." So I walk into the room to check on him. The room is dark, nobody is in there, and the patient is sleeping. I tell his nurse what happened and I go and sit back down at the CN desk. The call light goes off again. It is his room. Same voice, "Please, he is really hurting." I get up and walk back to the room. Same story. I tell his nurse and she gives him pain medicine through his peg and we reposition him in bed. The call light does not go off again. It was really eerie. Strange things happened on that floor.
This isn't scary, but it haunts me more than anything. I had a young mother come into labor and delivery for a scheduled CS for triplets at 33 weeks. As a PGY2, I was doing her H&P and ultrasound for fetal position. She was super squirrely and nervous, so I asked her if there was anything I could do to help allay her concerns. She told me they had warned her of all these terrible things that would happen to her with a multiple pregnancy, and none had. Heck, she'd been more walking yesterday, and the babies were all projected to be over 4 pounds, hence the CS now. Then she said, "I'm just waiting for the other shoe to drop." I tried to reassure her that everything looked great. Her CS did go well, and all 3 babies were big. I rounded on her that next morning and went off service. I even told her that she hadn't anything to worry about. She died the next day from acute cardiac decomposition in a helicopter on the way to another hospital trying to get a heart transplant. She, apparently, had been developing dilated cardiomyopathy, and the uterus pressing on her SVC was keeping her compensated. The delivery killed her. She knew. Somehow she just knew. That bothers me more than any ghosts.
What was your creepiest experience in a hospital?